question, how responsible can AI be in mobility? And I'm personally very much looking forward to this panel discussion. So please welcome back on stage Shalev and Manuel. Shalev, please feel free to sit right next to me. Perfect. It's so good to have you back, to have much more time to deep dive into that super, super interesting topic. If you haven't joined us before, just a few words about how we do our panels this year. I have chosen 4 topics here, and we have our wheel of topic. It's like in Germany we say Glücksrad. So let's see what topics our wheel of topic chooses for us out of the 4 that we have. We see it right behind us. And I just need to check with my cards. How responsible can an AI be in mobility? These are the 4 possible topics we have. And we choose responsible AI, scientific future scenario, or real-life development. And the second one, it's the last one. From Nerds with Love, what can AI change for the better? So let's start with the first one, responsible AI. Well, no hype, no buzzwords. What's the status quo of responsible AI, and what exactly does it mean for mobility? Who wants to start?
Happy to take that.
Manuel, please go ahead.
I think there's a general agreement about what responsible AI means. So what is trustworthy AI? What are the pillars of responsible AI? That it needs to be fair, it needs to be transparent, and all of these things. And I think that happens on a government level to define these ethics of AI. It happens on a company level where you see companies publishing code of conducts and code of ethics for AI to which they basically vow or try to work for. But I think in reality what we are missing is how do we make sure that these are implemented, in what ways. There are tools, there's data, there's other resources, but I think the question becomes very tough. How do you make this actionable and agreeable? Because in a lot of ways, many things are also not really measurable. Yeah? And I think about the autonomous mobility example. What does safety mean in autonomous driving? And is there an agreement around the world what that means? And I think the reality is we are still trying to figure it out.
I think with all the questions that I have in this panel discussion, it's most of the time up to your personal opinion, because this is quite a new field. We are all just testing and finding out. So just keep that in mind, that I'm asking you, but most of it's just about your personal feeling about it. So Shalev, what does responsible AI mean for you personally?
So I think you mentioned a really good point, actually, which is that we need to agree on what it means, right? And that's actually one of the big troubles, or challenges, really, is because as we move around the world, there's different perspectives on these things, and then when we're trying to develop, a uniform direction because we want everyone to do this safely and we want to make sure that we're all on the same page, it's sometimes difficult to find, to perfectly align. So in my talk, I talked about goal alignment between AI and humans, but a problem that we've been facing for thousands of years is goal alignment between humans and humans. So we actually need to align the goals between ourselves also, and that's just a challenge that I can only hope will be solved more in the future. But that's, I think, a very important aspect. And to that point, we need to get a lot of different perspectives. So not just AI researchers, not just people in business, but also people who it's actually going to impact, everyday people who are going to use these vehicles, right? So they need to have a voice in the development of these things, or at least we need to hear from them also what they think responsibility means. So I think it's very important to kind of crowdsource information so that we can get kind of the average perspective, I would say, right? And so we include as much as possible, make it agree with most people's definition.
Well, at the end of the day, it's about each and every one of us, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Being part of this definition.
But
exactly.
I think the funny thing is also that we as humans, we somehow set higher standards to AI than we put to our human selves. and about agreeing, and I just saw Shalev in front of the stage, and I see the people also here walking at Shift Mobility and the COVID situation. Some are still wearing the mask, some are not wearing the mask. I said to Shalev, maybe he's the more responsible human than I am, and now we're trying to talk about responsible AI, and we don't even have agreement on some of the things on the human level, but this is really what we need to get to. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really hard to get to one point there, because each and everyone has this individual story behind them and this individual thought. So yeah, quite complicated question, I guess that. The next one will be as well. So the decision between human and machine, who should make which decisions? Means what decision should, to the last point, be made by humans?
When you're
An ethical question as well. It's not getting easier.
So I guess when you're asking which decisions should be made, is it in a specific context or?
Like talking about mobility.
Okay. Well, if we have autonomous vehicles, right, and we really, at this point, we have Teslas and we have certain autonomous vehicles, and the human still needs to be aware
Part of it, yeah.
of what's going on so that they can step in any situation, and until we perfect the technology, right? So who needs to be making the decision? I don't know who needs to be, but I know what is happening. And once we get more fully autonomous vehicles, the cars will be making the decision in that case. But I do think it's important to kind of have always measures of the differences between decisions that the AI is making and humans are making, to make sure that we want it to be better than humans, but we also don't want it to make some things that we really don't foresee. Because actually, you know what? One thing that some people have been talking about in the research realm is for autonomous driving is if autonomous cars behave differently to how humans behave on the road, even if it's better than humans, if they behave differently, then that might actually make it difficult for the human drivers because they're not used to someone behaving like that, even if it's technically safer. So these are all like things, when you have AI and humans making decisions at the same time together, that's when you really need to make sure that it comes back to alignment again, right? That there's alignment between what you're trying to do. So
that's also something humans always do. It's like there's an accident with an autonomous driving car, but at the same amount of time, there were 100 accidents with cars driven by a human, but it's still about the autonomous driving car that makes the mistake.
I think
so that's something human,
Yeah. I think it's
the
because
feelings jump in.
There's this hope, I think, that AI can just improve the world, right? And so we hold it to higher standards, I think, also because we want it to be better than what we are.
We want it to be better, but then the next step, we don't want it to be better. That's why we can't control it anymore.
I saw a great example of that actually with an autonomous car, and it was a cartoon, and the person is obese, and he goes into this autonomous car, and he says to the car, take me to McDonald's, and the autonomous car says, no, I'm going to take you to the gym. So is this responsible AI? Yeah, because it's making a better decision maybe than the human in that case.
You're fascinated by that idea, right?
But do we want this autonomous system to make that decision? And I think that's the very thin line. I know it's a funny example for us, but it's a very thin line that we will see in the future.
Yeah, what decisions, it's an important question. We need to ask these questions now. What are the limits, right? Maybe we should just limit them to the road, maybe not, Maybe there should be a different algorithm for something else. So these are the right questions, I think.
Yeah. I think what's also very difficult to find an answer to is all the legal stuff. Who's legally in charge and responsible at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for at least when I think about cars, I think the pathway there is relatively clear. When I think about, you divide the level of autonomy from L0 to level 5, level 5 being full autonomy, level 0 just warnings to the driver, then everything up to level 2 is clearly in the responsibility of the driver because the system requires the driver to be attentive. Yeah. So no manufacturer in the world will take liability in case anything fails here, and because it's the human responsibility. And then when you go to these level 3 systems, which, for example, Daimler already introduced that make automatic decisions for lane changes and so on in the car, which these systems can already do up to 60 kilometers per hour. Daimler, for example, said they will take the legal responsibility of that system. Yeah? But I think the more you progress, the more difficult it becomes. And it may sound futuristic, but besides humans and companies, I think we could also open ourselves up to the possibility that the AI itself is an entity to be held reliable. Yeah? When you think about movies like Ghost in the Shell from the 80s, is a Japanese anime, there are AIs that are already acting quite autonomously, and they are also so difficult to differentiate from a human because they are humanoid robots. And they act in their own way. The question really becomes, why are they not also entities that should be held liable because they act in their own will?
I think a very important point also is we want to make sure that, you know, at least while we're developing these things, to really make sure that we're developing them in a responsible way. It's not just like we're talking about responsible AI, which is how the AI can be responsible, but it's very important for the actual developers and researchers of the AI to be responsible as well when they're developing, to think about what are the implications of the thing I mean, if you're programming anything, you need to think about what are the implications of what you're making, right? And AI is no different. It's another program. And so you need to think about what is the meaning, what is the impact that this is going to have. And so, I mean, we need to think for ourselves on that too. It's really important.
I fully agree on that, because there are also other jobs where this is happening, right? Think about lawyers, think about doctors that swear an oath. Why shouldn't be there a standard or an oath for AI designers? Yeah.
And if you just think about it, like doctors, how to make decisions and so on, that's something you mentioned in your keynote as well. We are feeding the AI with data and insights, but that's a picture everybody points when it comes to ethical questions. You're driving a car, and then there is an old lady jumping in front of your car and a young child.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, if I have to make that decision, it's quite difficult. How should the AI that I feed with my thoughts do the decision? So we don't come to a decision here. How should we?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I like a lot about the field and working with artificial intelligence is that philosophers have been asking these questions, maybe not that specific one, but you know, related questions for thousands of years and just talking about it, right? Like, what is reasoning? What's understanding?
Now we're sitting here saying, like, the AI has to make a decision. No matter what the decision is, it's the wrong one, for sure, you know?
I don't know if there's a right or there might be a right one, I'm not sure. This is why like the AI safety research is really important, right? Because we're looking at, I mean, I just was at a talk that was talking about the trolley problem and creating some sort of reinforcement learning algorithm to better solve it and stuff like that. So work is being done on this to think about it. But what I mean is, like, it's interesting that these philosophers have been asking and discussing these questions for thousands of years, and now we're at a point where it's become practical and not just discussion. Like, we're actually you know, asking these questions because it matters. Is this agent reasoning when it's doing this this question? So it's really interesting from that perspective, I think, as well. It's really cool.
Manu, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think in design, you know, even today, design is never value neutral, right? Because we have our perception system and we put that into our design. But optimal AI, I think, is for all. And when you make this example of the car that is the children or the child or the grandmother or even the driver itself, there are already some decisions, for example, for some automakers that will say, I will do the most to protect the driver in that scenario. Yeah? But I think optimal AI is AI that is for everyone. And so how do we make sure that this is happening in design, but it is also transparent how the AI came to some decision? But in the end, it becomes this philosophical question: is this a utilitarian AI, or is it a different type of philosophy that what I want to design into this AI?
Yeah, how's it making the decision is really important. That's that's explainable AI. A lot of researchers are working on that too.
Absolutely, and beside that, how smart is AI allowed to be? You know, there comes in the field again that we always want to control everything. I mean, how smart is AI allowed to be in mobility?
I think in general we would like AI to be as smart as possible, right? I know there are these smart or these apocalyptic scenarios about AI, that AI will take over and will kill the world and kill humans, etc., because it became too smart and we couldn't control it anymore. And I don't like to believe in this kind of scenario, but I think we need to make sure that AI is not misused or there is failures in AI. And I think that starts with the human again, because we are building these systems and AI systems for specific purposes, right? And we decide for which purposes we build them and how they are designed, and then they need to be explainable. But I don't like this Armageddon scenario that AI is, at some point becoming too smart and controls every one of us, and then in the end is killing everybody. But I think let's try to find these ways and these mechanisms that are actionable to make AI trustworthy AI.
Yeah, we definitely need to try to make it trustworthy. I do think we need to keep this, I mean, maybe not so apocalyptic future in mind, but we do need to ask these questions, even if we think there's a small chance of this happening. We need to ask these questions, because if we don't ask the questions, we'll never be prepared. There's this idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Some people thought that when the year 2000 hit, the world was gonna, come to an end, and everything's programmed with 1900s, and all the programs and airplanes are not gonna work, and airplanes are gonna fall out of the sky, all these things. But because everyone was so worried about it, and everyone was preparing it for so much, it actually wasn't as bad as people thought. And so this is like, or self-fulfilling, self-preventing, I don't remember exactly the name, but the fact that we're thinking about this is good, because it can help us, make sure that we're developing this in a good way. That'll help us get to a positive future. And you asked, like, how smart should AI be? I think the question is also, what decisions should we allow AI to make? Smart is like, well, what do you mean by smart? If you mean by smart making good decisions that help people, then it should be, it should do that as much as possible. But the question is not, I think, so much how smart should it be. It's more, what decisions will we allow AI or algorithms to make? That's, I think, a very, very important question.
And that's up to you. There we are, back again with the controlling part. Let's move on to the second part, because we actually touched it already, and that was, what can AI change for the better? You were both talking about the trust topic. So how can we make people trust in AI and make it more accessible, even those who are not into that tech stuff? How can we ensure trust here?
I think it's about experiencing it. When I think about autonomous cars, and I think it's very pragmatic also for me when you think just about the buying decision, for example, for some of your driver assistance systems. And when you go into a dealership and you buy a car, it was very simple to explain, this car has 100 horsepower, this one has 200 horsepower, this has big wheels, this has small wheels. And for the consumer, it's very easy to understand. But when you think about the presentations that we saw today, what is the car actually doing and how is it contributing to safety, and is it really safe? That's already very difficult to educate the consumer about in what situations that is bringing a benefit to him. So I think we even have very beneficial systems today, and I'm talking about the relatively simple ones in cars that do emergency braking or that do emergency lane changes, etc., that contribute to much lower risk of collisions, etc. But even those systems are already so tough to explain. So I think it starts really with experiencing the technology over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think, can you just repeat the question one more time? I just want
to how can we make trust, or how can we ensure trust, that people trust AI more?
Yeah, so I think there's two things. One is, we usually fear what we don't understand, right? If we don't understand it, like, how do I deal with this? How do I think about this, right? So I think AI, for the most part, we don't have to get down to the equation details. It's pretty intuitive, right? We show it, if it's doing something like object detection. I mean, this is a classic example. There's more things than this, but we're doing object detection, let's say. We show it a bunch of examples of what humans would identify. What is this, a cat? Is this a dog? What humans would do. As I mentioned today, we're showing them the answers, right? And then the AI learns to extract patterns from our answers and then generalize that. Now, if there's an issue with the data that we provide the AI, if we give something wrong, then it'll learn the wrong thing, right? So there's there's I mean, here's another two-parter. One is that if we provide the wrong data, it'll learn the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But also, even if we provide the right data, it might still make a mistake, right? It's probabilistic. It's not perfect. So one is, from an intuitive standpoint, I think people really can understand the intuition of how AI learns because, in a sense, it's very similar to how we learn from examples. This is one type of AI, right? And the second part is also, how do we ensure trust in AI? Is we need to have discussion on this, and also maybe organizations, and people have started doing this ethics things, but organizations that are really of experts and others, right? We need to have a lot of perspectives to ask the questions and try to answer these questions. So people need to understand. I hope people try to understand it as much as possible, and we need to make it easy for them to understand. But also, if we can delegate, if people can delegate that responsibility to certain organizations which have the experts and the thinkers there, then hopefully these organizations can ensure a positive future, and then people can put their trust in these organizations instead of just in the AI. You get what I'm saying,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I think it's quite the same when a couple of years back we were talking about digitalization. Lots of people were scared by that. So first thing is explain it very well, and then making them part of it, and then letting them experience it, what their benefit is. And I think that's the best way to make it here as well.
And ask questions too. Like, just
Exactly.
ask the questions, because you might ask questions that we haven't, the researchers and developers haven't considered 100%. So it's really, that's why it's useful to get everyone's perspective, I think. So.
Like crowd thinking again here. Perfect. So when talking about what can AI change for the better, in terms of mobility, I'm always thinking about there's a limited amount of people that can actually drive a car now. You were talking about assistance systems, but let's move that forward and develop it a little bit. Can AI help to bring younger people, elderly people, handicapped people, that they can also be part of the mobility, be part of cars?
Definitely.
Do you think so?
I think with autonomous cars, you make mobility much more accessible to people that were not mobile before, right? I think this is, besides the topic we always talk about, to make it more sustainable, to make it affordable, to make it safe. I think it's opening the doors, literally, for more people to be mobile. And so you get people into more mobility or other mobility patterns that they haven't been in before. But I think also this is what I like about Shift a lot, when we think about autonomous cars and autonomous mobility, I think it always has to fit in a broader ecosystem, right? And this is why it's called Shift Mobility and not Shift Cars. And we're talking about AI in mobility, not an AI in cars, because then this AI for cars fits into the ecosystem of smarter mobility and smarter AI in mobility, and it will affect public transportation, and it will affect the intermodality between different transportation modes even more. But I think unless the goal is more sustainability and doing something for the planet in that ecosystem, I think that is the ultimate goal. And if on the way we can bring people to be mobile that were not mobile before, that's another benefit. And I think that is definitely there. And I think when I looked at what OEMs are doing or what robotaxi players are doing, they are also thinking of these customers, because they are designing these robotaxis in a way that makes vehicles more accessible for the groups you've just explained.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's great because it makes it more freedom for people to be mobile, right? So if you can't drive, if we have autonomous systems, you could just move around. I think it's great. 100%.
Okay, final question here, because I know lots of people are scared in that kind of way. Can we really control and define what AI learns and then at the end decides? Can we control that?
Okay. Can we control what AI learns, right? AI is learning from our data.
And then at the end, what it decides.
What it
Can we
decides,
control that in the second step?
The thing that AI decides is, well, there's different types of AI. So let's talk about, supervised learning, just for this example. This is where we're showing it a bunch of examples, right? And it's learning from our patterns. So can we control what AI learns? What it learns is in the data. This is the key thing to understand. It's going to extract patterns from data. I mean, depending on how good your algorithm is, that pattern may be accurate or it may be less accurate. But it's only going to be as good as the data you provide. And so I think one of our big responsibilities is to make sure that we provide data that has fair data, that unbiased data. This is very important things to make sure that we provide good data to the AI so it won't make the same mistakes that maybe we might make. So humans aren't perfect. They're not always driving perfectly on the road. We know there's crashes. So we want to make sure to provide the right data to the AI so it won't make those same mistakes, right?
But that's just the first step. You mentioned that in the beginning. We put in the data, and then we want it to learn on its own. So can we, in the second step, make sure what it decides, or is that not into our control anymore? But I think that's what
it decides comes from the patterns it's extracting, right? So this is what I mean. What it decides comes from the data, really. It's trying to extract patterns that exist in the data. So number one, we need to worry about the data. Number two, but also obviously extremely important, is we need to worry or think about how is this AI extracting patterns, and can we make sure that it's extracting the right patterns? These are the questions that need to be asked.
And with these two, we can make sure what it decides in the end?
I think it needs to be explainable, right? It will make certain decisions, and you will be able to observe them. But in the end, you need to have, I think, about our R&D team that is doing stuff on autonomous cars, and we make sure that the development pipeline that we have from collecting the data, refining the data, feeding the AI with the data, validating what comes out of the data in terms of decision making, etc., needs to be ideally back traceable, right? If it comes to a certain decision, you need to make sure what thing in this data or what data point actually led this AI to this decision in the end. And this sounds super easy at the moment, and I gave this example maybe from end-to-end learning, etc., and gigantic networks. There are certain methods in AI and different learning methods where this works better, and there's others where this works maybe not so well. And I think we need to find these mechanisms that make these decisions explainable, and they need to go in our development and design pipeline for AI.
Yeah, definitely. This is one of the key points in AI safety research, is how do we make AI explainable? It's very difficult.
Okay, so final question. What's the thing you're most looking forward to when thinking about AI? You personally.
I'll let you go first.
Autonomous cars, of course. I want to experience autonomous cars, not the way that we see them today, where they work in a very limited space, but I want this to be as easy, as comfortable, as convenient and safe and sustainable as possible. And I mean, I come from an automotive background. For me, when you look at the automotive industry, the past 130 years, one could claim the car is still the same, has wheels, steering wheel, an engine. Nothing has happened. But I think what we're seeing now in this decade with AI and making cars autonomous is going to fundamentally change how we think about cars and mobility in the next 130 years. So that's really my vision for AI and mobility.
I think for me, one of the most exciting areas is in healthcare. There's a lot of really good applications in healthcare, digital pathology, surgical navigation, which I've worked with in the past. So AI can help doctors be more accurate. It can give recommendations. It can, I don't think it's at the place where we can replace doctors or anything like that. But it is helping them make better decisions and more accurate decisions. And that, for me, is, just helping people's lives. That's really exciting.
Absolutely, very, very important field. I would have loved to talk with you about the dark side of AI, but unfortunately, time is up. Manuel, Shalev, it was such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
This is your round of applause.